now for Movie Spotlight, your weekly ticket to the world of film, from the hottest blockbusters to hidden indie gems and everything in between. And joining us today in the studio are our resident movie critics, Jason Bechervaise. Welcome, Jason.
Hello, Anala.
And Marc Raymond. Welcome, Marc.
Hello.
Jason, your pick this week is the Korean period film, The King's Warden, featuring Yoo Hae-jin. This is about King Danjong, who was exiled to a small village by the Grand Prince Suyang in the 15th century.
Yeah, so this honestly was a period that I'm not particularly familiar with, and I think local viewers here will be more well-versed with... the King, certainly more so than me, although his time... in exile is less known, so hence this movie about it. I think other content is focused on some of the power struggles surrounding the young king. Now, he was abdicated, and then there was a failed coup led by his loyalists, and he was basically forced into isolation by the Grand Prince Suyang. This story turns to the king's time in a remote village. Okay, so much of the film is set in the village where the king is in exile, and there he forms a friendship with the village chief played by Yoo Hae-jin. The king is clearly distraught with what happens and is weakened, but finds strength in this new friend. Basically the only friend he comes to trust. And then you've also got this rather nefarious statesman played by Han Hyung-mo. This character is played by Yoo Ji-tae, who, is very hungry for power. Koreans and historians will be aware of the fact that the king was killed when he was just 16 years of age. And he has for centuries been a source of much interest and also indeed sadness given his fate. It's directed by, sorry, this is a long-winded, introduction here because, period films do need a bit of context.
Their background.
Yeah, so the film is directed by Jang Hyung-jun, a respected filmmaker in the local film industry. He's made movies such as Breakout, Forgotten, and more recently Rebound. He's also married to Kim Kun-hee, who wrote the hit Netflix period drama Kingdom, so maybe he got some advice there. And The King's Warden also features Jeon Mi-do, who I'm sure viewers here, and indeed viewers overseas, will recognise from Hospital Playlist, and Park Ji-hwan, who is in the Roundup films.
Jason, you mentioned that you weren't hugely familiar with this king's background. Do you need to be familiar with this history to fully appreciate the film, or do you think it's kind of accessible for people who maybe don't know anything about this history?
Yeah, actually, I went in cold, if you like, and I think actually it's pretty accessible. I've watched a lot of period films. I've watched a lot of Korean movies, and so, in some period
Famously.
Yes, and proudly, enthusiastically, and so some of these films can be really heavy going.
Yeah.
You kind of like, especially with all the subtitles and the complex dialogue. But actually, I found this really accessible. It's essentially, a bromance, really. And that's what really carries it. It's a simple, very simple story, a very affecting story, and also indeed a very sad story. And so I see it working with Koreans who, of course, viewers here will be familiar with it, although this part of his life, probably less so. But also I think it will be appealing to non-Koreans as well.
Mm-hmm. Now, Yoo Hae-jin has had quite an interesting career. He's played supporting roles for years in things like Public Enemy, Veteran, Taxi Driver. Now is a bankable lead. What did you make of his performance in this?
He's terrific. Actually, all the acting in this movie is brilliant. I think Park Ji-hyun, who plays the king, he's attracted a lot of notice. Claim actually here in Korea for his role. And Yoo Hae-jin, he's someone who's been around in the industry for a long time, for decades. Often playing these supporting roles, and he's been in some really big movies along the years. Public Enemy, Veteran. He starred alongside the likes of Song Kang-ho, and there are these kind of what I call ajashi actors, Song Kang-ho, Kim Yoon-suk, and I suppose Yuejin is certainly also part of that. But what's interesting is that Song Kang-ho, as much as I love Song Kang-ho, he's like the face of Korean cinema. But he and Kim Yoon-suk as well. They've struggled. Ha Jung-woo as well. They've struggled to try and attract those large audiences. Yu Sung-young is another one. But actually, Yuejin, with Confidential Assignment, The Night Owl, Exuma, and last year Yadang, they all did really well. And this is like during and post-pandemic. So actually, he's the kind of ajashi actor that really is a draw with viewers. And I think he's terrific in this movie. So much is reliant on this, this bromance, this friendship that forms. And, to his credit, he really does carry it. And he's just a character that you relate to. I was watching it, and there's just so much. You could see that the atmosphere in the screening was one of a connection with the characters. It felt really tangible, and I think he's very much part, central part of in terms of why the film works in the way it does.
Great acting across the board. You really enjoyed it.
I did, yeah.
Do you think Korean audiences and non-Korean audiences are going to connect with it as well? How well do you think it's going to perform in the cinemas?
You know what? I think it's going to do really well. Parts of it are a little bit silly, some of the slapstick humour, which that kind of thing doesn't work particularly well with me. But I can see why those moments are in there. And I see those actually working well with audiences here. It did, I think it sold 117,786 tickets on its first day. Reservations are well over 100,000. This is going into the Lunar New Year. And actually, I think its prospects are very, very strong. And I'm getting a bit excited. We've been talking about films just tanking at the box office for the last, not just 12 months, but for the last few years. Clearly, the industry is not where it is where it is or where it was, before the pandemic. And I think Lunar New Year might offer some. I mean, there might be cause for optimism, dare I say. And this comes on the back of a couple of films that have done quite well already. Once We Were Us, which we talked about, Choir of God, which I think is going on to close to 1 million admissions. So do we have another film that does well in theatres? I think so. And there's also Humit as well, or Hunit. It's got a peculiar name. That's also going to be released next week. So and that's also doing well in terms of reservations. So I think it's actually a bit exciting, and not actually. Yeah.
Mark, did you get a chance to see it?
Yeah, as Jason mentioned, it is showing us, or didn't mention, I guess, but there is some subtitled screenings of the film. There's not a lot, but there are in selected theaters around Seoul. So I was able to get to see it. And yeah, my little bit more mixed maybe than Jason, but I do
I'll be surprised if you came out raving about this movie.
But I liked the relationship between the two characters is the strength, as Jason mentioned. It's not the most dynamically directed film, and there's not some of the slapstick, as Jason mentioned, doesn't quite work. But yeah, the relationship is worth seeing. And yeah, I do agree with Jason in the sense that I think it'll probably do well with audiences. It seems like it's doing well already, and I think word of mouth will be pretty good. And it is just something a little bit different for these type of period films, right? It isn't as kind of epic or kind of complex, they're kind of deep into the history. It is very much more character based, and that I think is a nice change up, I guess, from what you typically get with these type of films.
And it's pretty powerful at the end as well, actually.
So some kind of mixed reviews, which means listeners will have to get out to movie theatres and see the movie and make up minds
and
for
with subtitles
themselves.
as well,
and
as
with
Mark
subtitles
mentions.
as well. Yeah, exactly. So no excuses not to go.
Yeah.
We'll move on now. Mark, your pick this week is Send Help, starring Rachel McAdams and Dylan O'Brien. It opened last week. It's still playing in theatres here and has been drawing strong reviews. What's it about?
Yeah, it's directed by the veteran filmmaker Sam Raimi, who's now in his mid-60s and kind of began his career in these kind of low-budget horror films where he made his reputation, movies like Evil Dead and Evil Dead 2. And then he went on to blockbusters. He did the Spider-Man films, the ones with Tobey Maguire from the 2000s. And this one's kind of in between in terms of budget and genre. It's kind of it begins as a kind of workplace satire where you have this ultra competent but rather awkward female employee played by Rachel McAdams, who's passed over for an earned promotion by her newly appointed sort of nepo baby boss who's taken over from the father who has died, played by O'Brien. And so, and then the movie kind of, the teen goes on a private plane to Thailand, and this isn't a spoiler because this is in all the previews and everything. Okay. It crashes, and they end up, it ends up being kind of a survivalist film. It's only her and the boss who survive. And the dynamics shift because he's injured his leg, and also he's fairly useless as a person generally because he hasn't had to learn any skills. And she is a big fan of the TV show Survivor and has even applied to kind of go on the show. So she knows some basics on how to survive, how to make shelter, all these things. And so she becomes kind of has the power over him. And then after that, there's numerous other twists and turns I won't kind of get into, but it has kind of some of the horror gore elements of Raimi's early work, but it also has this kind of examination of gender kind of dynamics, both in and out of the office. So yeah, that's the basic setup, I would say.
Definitely sounds like a super interesting premise. I don't know, it sounds kind of funny to me a little
Yes,
bit.
it is.
How do you think it executes the setup, and do you agree with this critical praise it has been receiving?
Yeah, I really enjoyed the film, and I would recommend it highly, provided you're not easily grossed out, because there are some extreme moments. There's a hunting of a boar, and there's things like that are, and even the plane crash itself is actually played for kind of comedy, because the people who die are just terrible people, and we kind of enjoy like having them, die violent deaths. And so there's some of that. But what I really liked about the movie is that it kind of brings up all these issues around gender inequality. But it's not simplistic about its characters. That's what really saves it. It could have been a really easy movie where she's totally good and he's totally bad. It's not like that. It really makes the characters way more complicated by the end, and gives a really good part for McAdams, who's often kind of always good in everything, but is kind of underutilized. And so she really has this great part where she starts out as this kind of frumpy, kind of frowned upon, put upon kind of person. Probably the least realistic aspect of the film is trying to make us convinced that she's not attractive, but that's beside the point. But then, but the character becomes way more complicated, even kind of problematic as the movie goes on, and you're really put in this position of you are sympathetic towards her, but then how sympathetic and how far are you willing to go with this character, and how she deals with both the relationship with this man, but also just generally her kind of striving for kind of power. And then there's also O'Brien's character, the boss character, does get more kind of not exactly sympathetic, but more complicated as the film goes on. And there's all these other interesting examples. Like you would think there would be more romantic kind of tension maybe. There's some of that, but there's also this weird kind of mother-son almost dynamic, because he's kind of in this submissive position. She has to take care of him, and then he rebels against that. And so there's all those kind of dynamics too. So yeah, it's a really, really interesting film. I think it's Raimi's best film since Drag Me to Hell, which is over 15 years ago now. So it's nice to see, a veteran director getting a chance to make a movie like this that's an original film, not like, the last film of his I watched was, I think he did the Doctor Strange sequel for Marvel, which was fine, but isn't really a real Sam Raimi film. This definitely feels like that. And so, yeah, I'd highly recommend, if again, provided you're not easily disturbed
Grossed out.
or grossed out, yeah.
So really enthusiastic recommendation from Mark. Jason, did you get a chance to see the film?
I did. It's an absolute blast.
Another enthusiastic recommendation.
Yeah. It's it starts off in kind of Bridget Jones territory, and that's kind of what I thought was going to happen. And she's at home, sipping drinking lots of wine and just really unhappy with a working environment and some creepy guys, and then it just goes off in a completely different direction. This plane crashes in kind of Kingsman style, and quite violent and almost cartoonish, and as Mark mentioned, the gender dynamics are just really interesting, and it's just so unpredictable. It kind of and it's some serious kind of messages to the film despite its kind of comical tone. It was. I had a great time with it. I'd highly recommend it.
Great. Well, that's where we'll wrap up this week's Movie Spotlight. Big thanks, as always, to our movie critics. Thanks so much, Jason.
Thank you.
And thanks, Mark.
Thank you.